Welcome back. You're watching Showdown, and we are joined now live out of Perth by Senator Matthias Cormann for Western Australia, who's also the Shadow Assistant Treasurer, spokesperson for Financial Services, and has responsibility for superannuation. Senator, thanks for your company.
Good to be here.
I'll sneak in a few questions about some of the costings, if I can, a little bit later about the NBN, but I've got you here to talk about superannuation. The government, if you like, have introduced a policy. It's not nearly as significant as what the super industry feared it would be, or indeed as what the opposition said it might be. The sector seems pretty happy with what's happened, but your side of politics is still irate.
Well, I mean, the sector is relieved that the government has backed off from the worst aspects of what they had in store for people saving for their retirement. But what we've got to remember, of course, is that, I mean, this is not a fundamental shift in the government's position. This was just a tactical retreat from a government that was under significant pressure, both from the public and, of course, internally from some of its own members. If Labor was re-elected, I have absolutely no doubt that they would revisit all of the nasty tax increases targeting superannuation that they've been looking at over the last year, because fundamentally nothing has changed with Labor. Their budget is still in a mess. They're desperate for cash. They've made $120 billion worth of unfunded spending commitments. So whatever they say now to get people off their back, you know, in his press conference, Wayne Swan wasn't even prepared to guarantee that there won't be more changes to superannuation taxation in the budget, let alone after the next election.
They're not going to win the next election. Let's just call a spade a spade. Every poll has them down and out for the count. You guys will win the election now because they're not going to.
You can't assume that. We certainly don't assume that.
Yeah, maybe not. Nothing is fully assumed, but at the end of the day, the polls, the betting agencies, it'd be an absolute miracle for the government to find a way to get back. What interests me about that is that on this superannuation policy, what they've done is they've made it something that they will only legislate in government. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but this, if they don't win the next election, is a moot issue, because none of it actually will become legislation anyway. Things will stay exactly as they are now, and then there'll be whatever changes your side of politics looks to bring in.
Well, last Friday was a cynical political exercise from the government under pressure. They clearly understood how unpopular their plans to increase taxes on superannuation were out in the electorate. They were bleeding on it because some of their own senior members were attacking the government over it, so they thought they'd make some sort of announcement to try and get people off their back.
But that's your understanding as well, isn't it? Your understanding is that they won't be introducing anything legislatively until after the next election, which means that none of these things will become law if your side wins.
The announcement that Labor made on Friday has got absolutely no status. Wayne Swan was not even prepared to guarantee that there won't be more increased taxes on superannuation in the budget. They've already indicated that they won't be legislating any of the things that they've announced on Friday. I mean, this was just all part of a cynical political strategy, because they realised that their efforts over the last few months, casting around for more cash at the expense of people saving for their retirement, was deeply unpopular in the electorate, and they wanted to stop the bleeding. This was all about the government's political self-interest, not about what is in the best interests of the nation.
But just to be clear, if you win the next election, if your side of politics wins the next election, and if they haven't legislated what they've announced, then what they've announced will not be law. Simple as that, correct?
Well, simple as that. We will be releasing our own policy in the lead-up to the next election. We have already, of course, made a very clear commitment that under a coalition government there will be no detrimental, unexpected changes to superannuation, because we recognise that people across Australia who are doing the right thing by saving for their retirement to get themselves in a position where they can look after their own needs in retirement and not be a burden on the public purse, they deserve certainty and stability in superannuation policy and tax arrangements, so they can plan their future with confidence.
Can you see no circumstances under which there can be a tax on the earnings of super for the very high income? Now, Labor have set this at $100,000. They want to introduce above that level of earnings a 15% tax. They say it'll only hit 0.4% of the population. That figure could well rise over time, obviously, as more and more people go into having had compulsory super for longer. But my question for you is there no point at which you think that significant earnings from super should be taxed on the way out? Frankly, it was surprising to me to find out that someone could have $10 million in super, earn $1 million a year through retirement off that $10 million with a decent return, and not pay 1 cent in tax during that entire retirement period on the $1 million. Do you really support that?
Well, firstly, there would be hardly anyone who has got a super fund with $10 million in it. I mean, like, that is just the fur fee that the government puts up. Superannuation is not a savings vehicle for the rich and the fabulously wealthy. They've got a whole series of other options. Superannuation is predominantly the retirement savings vehicle of choice for the aspirational middle class. Now, secondly, we don't support Labor's increased taxes on superannuation. This is, of course, another one of those broken promises from the Prime Minister. The tax-free status of super payments to the over 60s was one of the achievements of the Howard Costello government. The current government, Julia Gillard and Wayne Swan, were emphatic. They gave the absolute most emphatic promise possible to
But don't you think there should at least be some cap on it, though, at some point? Even if there might only be small numbers of people earning that much, it just strikes me that the tax-free status of significant earnings, perhaps not as low as 100,000 as picked by the government, but surely at some point you need to start taxing it?
This is money that is taxed on the way in, it is taxed on the way through, and one of the significant achievements of the Howard Costello government is to make it tax-free on the way out, as an incentive, of course, to encourage people to lock up more of their money into superannuation pre-retirement, so it's available post-retirement. Now, the point here is, Julia Gillard promised that Labor would never tax super payments to the over 60s. The announcement last Friday was that they would tax the super payments to the over 60s. It's just another broken promise from the Labor Party.
There's a report in The Australian today that says that the Coalition is drafting a policy that could remove obstacles for those who want to put more into their super funds each year. You're either doing it or you're not. Is it something that you're doing or are you not doing it?
Well, I mean, obviously, we will make those final judgments around what can be done when we know what the true position of the budget is. I mean, we recognise that after 5 years of Wayne Swan cutting concessional contribution cuts, cutting co-contribution benefits for low-income earners, that both concessional caps and co-contribution benefits are too low, and we would like to revisit that in government as soon as the budget is in a strong enough position for us to do so. And that is our commitment. Now, we will make a final judgment on quantum and timelines when we know what the true position of the budget is, which won't be until the Treasury and Finance Secretaries have released the pre-election fiscal outlook.
So the only side of politics at the moment going into the next election committed to increasing the co-contribution limit from 25 to 35,000 and therefore allowing it to continue at the 15% tax rate rather than bump up higher is Labor rather than the Coalition. Is that right?
You can't trust a single word Labor says about superannuation. They said they would not make any changes to super, and then they cut concessional contribution caps from $50,000 and $100,000 down to $25,000. Then they said they would re-increase concessional caps for some to $50,000, and now they're increasing them by $15,000 less to $35,000. Another broken promise. What we've said, we are being honest with the Australian people. What we're saying is that after 5 years of Labor, the budget is in a mess. We will make we would like to provide appropriate incentives to encourage people to save more so they can look after their own needs in retirement, but we will do it in an appropriately targeted and fiscally responsible way. So once we know what the position of the budget is that we're dealing with, we will make these final judgments. At that point in time, that is a responsible course of action. We are not going to make promises that we can't keep. Whatever Labor says now, we know that after the election, if they were re-elected, they would just do what they've done over the last 5 years, and that is increase taxes on superannuation for low-income earners and the middle class.
You say that you can't make these sort of commitments now until you know the true state of the budget because of fiscal discipline, yet on the very same day that you're saying that, Senator, we've got a $30 billion policy for the NBN that's been rolled out by your leader and your shadow communications spokesperson, Malcolm Turnbull. Why can't people have a $10,000 increase in their co-contribution limit with a 15% tax because of the budget, yet you can roll out a $30 billion NBN without seeing the figures first?
Well, I mean, obviously we will be releasing our superannuation policy in good time before the election, and people will be able to pass judgment on that. As far as the NBN is concerned, obviously that is a significantly lower amount of public expenditure than what is currently on the table from the government. So what we're doing here is actually significantly saving compared to what the government has put on the table by delivering faster, better broadband, more affordably for the end consumer, in a way that is also more affordable for the taxpayer.
But I guess what confuses me though is that it's a different use of logic. On the one hand, because you don't want to announce your policy yet on super, you want to be able to hold off and use the excuse that you need to see what the fiscal settings are. Yet on the other hand, we've got the need, it would seem politically, to have some sort of alternative to the NBN in place. So the opposition's prepared to roll out a $30 billion policy sight unseen without knowing what the true state of the budget figures are. The very same reason that you're not pursuing superannuation details now.
Well, there is no inconsistency there at all, actually, because changes to concessional contribution caps, changes to core contribution benefits for low-income earners, all of these things have got direct implications for the budget bottom line. As you know, the budget treatment of the NBN, courtesy of decisions by the current government, means that the NBN is not actually on budget. The current government probably will have to spend well in excess of the 45 billion dollars that they've allocated to it. They'll probably have to spend nearly double that to sort of do the things that they've said they would do. Our approach is much cheaper, so there clearly is a significant saving there for taxpayers across Australia. And of course, the $29.5 billion that we intend to spend on delivering faster, better broadband for people is what, on the advice that we've got, we have to spend in order to get the NBN ready for sale.
Senator, as the Assistant Treasury spokesperson, you're a key member of the Coalition's economic team. That same economic team has complained far and wide about the fact that the NBN under the Labor Party is off budget, yet the policy announced today is off budget. Now, you would have obviously been party to that decision through the ERC process. How can you guys do that when one of your key themes when attacking the Labor Party is hypocrisy on other areas? This is hypocrisy writ large, isn't it?
Not at all. I mean, the current government is planning to, I mean, according to what they admit, is planning to spend nearly $50 billion on the NBN, and they are, you know, essentially they've determined to treat the NBN like an investment making positive returns. Now, we've always been sceptical of that. We've always been critical of that assumption because given the figures that the government has put forward, that is highly questionable.
Yet
now,
despite that, you've kept it off budget.
Well, if I can answer the question, we will be making a much smaller outlay at $29.5 billion, yet we expect, on the advice that we've got, that the revenue generated will be broadly similar to the revenue generated under the model that the government is pursuing, which means that if the government can assert that the NBN is an investment which will deliver positive returns, then that is much more the case for us. And of course, our plan is to get the NBN to a position where it can be sold.
But you can see, can't you, why, when you sit back and look at it, the public might be cynical that there's been so many complaints about the fact that the NBN is off budget by the opposition, yet now the opposition policy, yes, it's less, but it's still $30 billion. It's off budget.
Well, I mean, I don't know how many other ways I can explain it to you, Peter, but the government, even on their estimates, is spending $20 billion more for the same amount of revenue. If the government with $20 billion more says, and we've questioned that and we still question it, but if the government with $20 billion more in capital expenditure says that they're going to make a positive return on their investment, then it stands to reason that when you spend $20 billion less with the same revenue to be generated, that you will make a much higher return on your investment and definitely a positive return on your investment, which means that it is quite appropriate to continue with the budget treatment that the government has determined.
One last question on the NBN, and then I just want to ask you a question on boats, given that you're over there in WA where you've just had one roll up on the mainland. But do you have some sympathy for the former communications spokesperson, Tony Smith? He was forced to try to come up with an alternative to the massive NBN policy of the government at the 2010 election with about $5 or $6 billion to play with, and it cost him his career on the front bench, certainly in the shadow ministry, with the job that he did. He didn't even have his leader there for the rollout. Yet here we are, Malcolm Turnbull, he's got $30 billion to play with, 5 times the amount that poor old Tony Smith got, and the leader's right there with him in lockstep. Was Tony Smith hung out to dry in 2010?
No, not at all. Tony Smith is a highly valued colleague who is making a great contribution. Now, the truth of the matter is that over the last 3 years, the world moved on. And of course, the current government had 3 more years to lock in contracts and establish facts in relation to the NBN. So we really had to pick up the pieces with our policy in the lead up to this election after 3 more years of Labour. And realistically, the best we could do in terms of delivering better, faster broadband for you know, more affordably for the end consumer and more affordably for the taxpayer was the policy that Tony Abbott and Malcolm Turnbull announced today.
Just finally, Senator, before we let you go, you're a West Australian Senator. It was over there in your home state that an asylum boat quite remarkably managed to evade detection and get all the way to the mainland. I, for one, have often made the point that that rarely, if ever, happens. So what are we worried about? The people of Geraldton weren't too worried. They were all out there sightseeing, taking snaps of it. That said, it happened. Have you got any eyewitnesses in the region that saw it and have a reaction for you to it?
Well, let me just say, I mean, this is just completely unbelievable. I mean, the level of incompetence from this government and the complete disregard when it comes to our national security and our border protection is just breathtaking. And I mean, did I have some first-hand reports? Yes, I did. I actually had my mother-in-law ring me to tell me that there was a boat arriving over the horizon. People in Geraldton actually couldn't quite believe what was happening because it was truly so unbelievable.
She saw it first-hand, did she?
My mother-in-law saw it firsthand on the foreshore in Geraldton, I mean, I probably heard about it more quickly than the Minister for Justice and Customs. So I mean, look, I mean, next we're going to have illegal boat arrivals coming up the Swan River. I mean, if Labor stays in government much longer, that's probably what's going to be next.
All right, Senator Matthias Cormann, we appreciate you joining us on Showdown. Thanks very much for your company.
Always good to be here.